Yes.
Which would be criminal responsibility evaluation, so mental state and legal standard are relevant. So what were your findings on number 8?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to say about number 8 is that I wasn't called up here just to make a diagnosis or talk about symptoms. This is a criminal responsibility evaluation. And one of the things that I take a look at very carefully when I'm doing something like this is what's the standard for criminal responsibility in the jurisdiction. Now, I'm aware that the court will instruct the jury about the standard and how you apply it and so on, but my understanding of the standard for criminal responsibility in Massachusetts is that a person is not criminally responsible if at the time of the offense they suffered from a mental disease or defect and as a result lacked substantial capacity either to appreciate the criminality or wrongfulness of their conduct or to conform their conduct to the requirements of the law. So there were really 3 parts. There really are 3 parts to that criminal responsibility standard. The first is mental disease or defect, and that's one of the reasons why I've paid so much attention to the symptoms and when they began and things like that. But the other thing that I try to do is take those symptoms and see how they affect somebody, in this case Ms. Clancy's, capacity for knowing that something like this was illegal or wrong, or how they affected her capacity for conforming her conduct to the requirements of the law, which I think of as kind of controlling her behavior. And to determine, is that something that those 3 elements are those things that you kept in mind throughout your evaluation of the records and your interview of the defendant and the psychological testing that you did? It is, yes. And it's something that I put on page 1 of my report because I always try to do that to try to make it as clear as I can that this is something I'm paying attention to throughout the entire evaluation.
So that's your mindset when approaching the evaluation of Ms. Clancy?
It is, yes.
So, Doctor, to conclude, would you relate your opinion as it relates to the standard of a person being lacking criminal responsibility at the time of the commission of a crime in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
Well, there are 2 arms to the test for criminal responsibility. One has to do the defendant's ability to control their conduct, and the other has to do with their knowledge of the wrongfulness of their acts. I'd like to address each of those separately, if I may.
Sure.
With regard to my opinion is that Ms. Clancy was, due to her mental disease, unable to conform her conduct was to the requirements of the law on the day that she took the lives of her children. And let me give you the basis of that opinion. First of all, she was hearing a voice which was commanding her to engage in the killing behavior, and she did not feel any sense of control. She felt that she had to obey the instructions she was receiving. It was a matter where she was just following the command rather than being able to make any decision to do it or not. And, for example, I asked Ms. Clancy.
No, you can't say what you talked. Doctor, you can't. You cannot say what she told you. All right.
Okay. All right. I will not do that. Let me just make sure I'm covering other aspects of this. The second evidence that she was lacking control was the fact that she made a severe suicide attempt, also based on the command hallucination that she heard that day, so that she not only cut her throat and jumped out of a window, she very much wanted to die. Now, in my research on women who kill their children, I've divided the motives into 5 categories, and I want to look at how Ms. Clancy to those motives.
So tell us the 5 categories.
Yeah, the 5 categories are: first, altruistic filicide.
What does that
Secondly,
mean? What does that mean, altruistic filicide?
Altruistic filicide occurs when a murder is committed out of love rather than hostility. It is an effort on a mother's part to do what is best for the child. They may believe the child is, they may have a delusional belief the child is about to be tortured in their delusional mind, and they take their life in doing what they believe is in the best interest of the children based on their delusional idea. Altruistic filicide also occurs when a mother may plan to take her own life, and in her psychotic thinking and severe depression, it is distorted, and she may believe that the child will be worse off if she remains alive. So, for example, in Ms. Clancy's case, she believed that, as the jury has already heard, she was obsessional about caring for her children. She consulted with others at work to try and do exactly what was right for her children, and she believed that if Ms. Clancy took her own life, her children would be in terrible shape, and in her mind, she believed that she would be doing her children a favor by having them go to heaven with her rather than remain on earth without her doing the mothering. Her mind was so distorted like that.
Okay. So if you could just tell us the other titles of the other 4 types that you were referred to. Just tell it without getting into detail if they don't apply to Ms. Clancy.
All right. The second category does apply to Ms. Clancy, and that is called acutely psychotic filicide.
Okay.
And this occurs when someone is frankly psychotic. They may have delusions or hallucinations. They're out of touch with reality, and rather than having any rational motive, they're simply acting on their psychotic beliefs. So those 2 both apply to Ms. Clancy. The other 3...
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, that's right. Just give us the other 3, the captions of them.
The other 3 which do not apply, one is called child maltreatment, in which a parent may shake the child to death or throw a child against a wall in an abusive manner. The next category is unwanted child, where someone, just for their convenience, the child is a burden, and they kill the child for that motive. And the final motive is spouse revenge filicide. That is, someone hates their spouse so much that they're willing to sacrifice the child as a way to punish the spouse. And the 3 latter categories clearly do not apply to Ms. Clancy. She loved her husband, respected her husband, had a good marriage. She never spanked or ever abused her child, and all of her children were wanted. In fact, she planned to have a fourth child. So those three categories clearly do not apply. If I can explain how the two categories did apply, I've already mentioned that Miss Clancy believed that a distorted belief that her children would just be miserable, and she could not imagine them continuing to exist and have a decent life without her being there as a mother. And so in that sense, she did what she believed was morally right, even though she understood that ordinarily killing a child is against the law. She believed that she was doing what was right for her children with her distorted psychotic thinking about the children's need for her. And then with respect to the second category of acutely psychotic, Ms. Clancy was under the influence of a command hallucination and idea of influence, so that at that time, rather than the ability to make a rational decision, she was so in the grip of her psychotic command hallucination and idea of influence that she lacked the capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of disorder.
And as far as the substantial capacity to appreciate wrongfulness or criminality of conduct, were you able to come to an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty about that?
Yes.
And what's your opinion regarding that?
That she had retained that capacity.
And what information do you rely upon to come to that conclusion?
The first point is that this was a continuation. Her mental state at that time was a continuation of the mental state she had had for months. And it was a mental state that included the capacity to control her behavior and also to be able to conform her conduct to standards of law. So in that sense, first of all, there's not an indication to me that there was something that changed the overall capacity in that regard. Secondly, to the extent we are talking about the ability to conform her conduct to the law, one can analyze her actions and her behaviors and her thoughts on that day, or as close as possible, to the moments of the deaths. And that includes taking one of her children to a pediatrician that day, engaging in fun activities around the house that day, having engaged with one of her children's teachers the day before, having engaged in normal conversations with the restaurant that she ordered food from, 3V, and then also interactions with the pharmacy, CVS, where she was getting the Miralax from. So in all these places, there was the ability to act normally. There doesn't seem to be any deviation from where she had been all along, which included this capacity. Furthermore, I would add that as a part of her interactions with the community or in driving, she had abided by law and abided by standards of the community at all those times. So there isn't necessarily, to me, any way in which that deviated that afternoon.
So you're speaking about her ability to conform conduct, which is one of the things we're talking about here. But I want to go back to the appreciation for wrongfulness or criminality. As far as that goes, were you able to form an opinion about that?
Yes, sorry about that.
That's
yes.
Okay. So what's your opinion about her ability to substantially conform, or excuse me, her substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness or criminality of her conduct?
So I again would go to thinking about what had been her state of mind for at least the month prior, the several months prior. And in all that time, there wasn't any feature that indicated that she didn't have that capacity. But furthermore, when there were moments when she thought about harming the children, when she had the thoughts about that, she was aware in those moments beforehand that that was wrong or against the law, and that she could be punished for such an act.
You're referring to the December conversation with her husband and her mom?
Yes, and her thoughts about the idea that if anyone knew what I was thinking, the children might be taken away from me.
And also, did the fact that she hadn't had any significant medication changes during that time period, does that also inform your opinion about that?
Well, as that aligns with what I was saying before about how, while depressed, her mental state was relatively stable. It was perhaps improving. I'm not sure about that, but it was stable.
Move to strike that if he's not sure about it.
All right. That answer is stricken. All right.
So the fact that she hadn't undergone any more significant medical or medication changes, I should say, did that signify to you that she had been in the same kind of state she had in the months before?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about the interaction with Dr. Tufts on January 23rd? Did anything about that suggest that there were any concerns or distress that would have changed her ability to appreciate wrongfulness of her conduct?
No. In that interaction, she displayed normal thinking and the ability to think ahead and to navigate the world.
And what about the statements that she referred to when she was killing the kids, the go to God? Does that inform your opinion?
It does.
And why?
My understanding is that the sentiment, go to God, is a way of bestowing or thinking about the children as innocents and as ones who hadn't done wrong, while what she was doing was the opposite, was wrong, or could be construed as wrong. And so go to God not only was a hope for the children, but also a description of the situation.
Okay. And what about the report from her that the voice was telling her, this is your last chance? Is that significant to identify whether she would have had some knowledge or known that it was something that was wrong?
Well, to the extent that it was seen as her last chance, yes, because there was an awareness that it was something that would be disallowed by their father.
And as far as after the incident, when she woke up at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, you're aware that she reported to the staff there that she was horrified, correct?
Yes.
And so the fact that she immediately afterwards identified that she was horrified, does that go to her capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct?
Yes. One can consider that her mental state, once she was removed from the dexmedetomidine, was similar to what it had been on January 24th. And in that regard, the feeling of horror, the feeling of shame that comes from being horrified, indicates that she was aware that it had been the wrong thing to do.
And then finally, just to go back to the substantial capacity to conform conduct, you've told us a little bit about that, about the fact that her condition hadn't really changed all that much. You outlined what she did that day. But is there anything else to consider based on everything that you reviewed that would indicate to you that she did maintain the substantial capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law?
I think that in the household, she was engaging in this activity methodically, which highlights to me that there was an ability to conform her behavior to expectations of living in a household.
What do you mean methodically?
As I understand the deaths, they were done methodically, and I think you asked me about that earlier, one by one, in a way that was organized and that was intended to achieve a particular goal. Similarly, her attempt at suicide was organized and thoughtful in a sense that it included as many possible methods as possible.
And as far as the killings of the children methodically, did she report to you in any way that she was given direction by this voice on how to complete the act and what exactly to do?
No, she did not.
And what about the call with Patrick? Is there anything about that indicates that she maintained some control or the ability to control herself where she did engage in a short conversation with him?
Well, that aligns with what we were talking about before in terms of being aware that he would disapprove or disallow this, and yet she didn't say anything. She didn't say help, or she didn't say, I'm having these thoughts, so it wasn't stated.
So again, as far as your overall evaluation of this defendant, Lindsay Clancy, regarding the events of January 24th, 2023, what ultimately is your opinion to a degree of medical certainty regarding criminal responsibility?
My opinion is that she retained the capacities that were required for having criminal responsibility for these actions.
Thank you. Oh, and
do you recall the medications that Dr. Tufts prescribed Lindsay?
I believe the first medication she started was Zoloft, 25 milligrams.
And what is that? Tell us what Zoloft is. What
Zoloft
effect does it have on a person?
I'm sorry?
What effect does that have on a person?
Well, Zoloft is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is a type of antidepressant that started being used around 1988, I believe. Prozac was the first one, Zoloft was the second. When it works to be helpful, it combats both anxiety and depressive symptoms that people might have. It also has, in some people, an effect of causing a feeling of jitteriness and increasing anxiety. So it's something that does have some potential side effects as well as beneficial effects.
And when she was prescribed the original 25 milligrams of Zoloft, did she in fact take that, or did she defer on taking that?
My recollection of the records is that she had it prescribed, picked it up, but did not take it for at least a couple of weeks because she did not wish to take medication. She was, I believe, still breastfeeding at that time. There are medications, and Zoloft would be one that would likely appear to some extent in the breast milk.
Okay, so because she was worried about that, she held off on that, but ultimately did take the prescription from Dr. Tufts. Is that right?
The records indicate that she did eventually start taking the 25 milligrams.
Sorry. Does it indicate when she started taking them after that little hiatus?
To be exact, I'd have to look at the records, but I believe it was at the end of September.
And was that dosage increased at some point?
It increased from 25 milligrams to 50 milligrams.
And what happened when Lindsay took the 50 milligrams of Zoloft prescribed by Dr. Tufts?
The records indicate that she had a rather rapid series of difficulties, that she had insomnia for, I believe the records say 48 hours, couldn't sleep. It's something that would be called activation, that these medications can cause in some people who are more susceptible.
Now, by mid-October, after she began taking the Zoloft, would you agree that the records indicate a week after starting the medication and increasing the dose, she reported in October to Dr. Tufts, what you're relating is that she felt, how did she describe it to Dr. Tufts? If you could, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Well, she felt that she talked about being numb. She talked about not being herself. She talked about feeling worse, not better. Antidepressants usually take at least 2 to 3 and frequently 4 to 6 weeks to have useful effects, but sometimes side effects can happen very quickly.
Did she also indicate, looking at your affidavit, that she was crying all day, she was experiencing mental fog, terrified to start something new, anxiety had gotten much worse? Did she tell that to Dr. Tufts at that time at the end of October?
Yes, I do recall those things being in the record.
All right, and following through again on your affidavit, was there further explanation from Lindsay's recitation of symptomology to Dr. Tufts? Did she further state about racing thoughts, paranoia? What did she say? Look at your report, look at your affidavit, if that helps you refresh your memory.
I actually don't have the affidavit with me at the moment. I do have some of the records, but...
Well, let me just approach you then and hand you your affidavit, paragraph 13, and see if that refreshes your memory.
Thank you. Yes.
What did she say to Dr. Tufts?
She reported, Dr. Tufts reported that Lindsay's psychiatric condition was generally deteriorating. That's a checkbox on one of the forms that her records.
What did Lindsay say her symptoms were at that point?
That she was having the racing thoughts, and that she was also feeling, as I said, not like herself, that her depression was worse than it had been. I believe that's also around the time that Dr. Tufts thought of trying a medication called Zolresso.
Zolresso.
Yes.
And what is that? Is that you need that by way of injection?
Yes, Zolresso is no longer marketed. It wasn't a particularly successful medication. It requires a 60-hour continuous IV infusion.
In a hospital setting or in a medical setting?
You have to be medically monitored. It doesn't necessarily need to be a hospital, but those are not necessarily things that can be done outside of a hospital.
So she didn't do the Zolresso though, right?
She did not. It also costs $34,000 just for the medication, not for the...
Yes.
Now, in your report, you indicate that part of the timeline of her medication and her decline is the September time period where she was prescribed the Zoloft, right?
Yes.
And you indicate that she had reported, and it's reflected in the records, that she increased the Zoloft, and that's when she couldn't sleep for 48 hours straight, right?
Yes.
And you're aware of what the instructions were, having reviewed everything in this case, what the pill bottle said as far as the plan for the Zoloft?
I'm not sure specifically the incremental plan to go from 25 milligrams to 50 milligrams of Zoloft.
Well, I have the bottle, exhibit number 2, sertraline, not Zoloft, right? Brand name Zoloft?
Yes.
Says take 1 oral tablet once a day for 1 week, then increase to 2 tablets daily thereafter.
Right.
Right on the label.
Right. That's 25 milligrams to 50 milligrams.
And again, having been at the majority of this trial, you aware that there were 30 in that prescription and 23 left in the bottle when they were inventoried.
Yes.
And those are pills that were in Patrick Clancy's possession at the time of these events in January. You're aware, right?
Yes, I believe they were in the middle console on the lower part of his truck, the lower part of the middle console in his truck.
So if there's only 7 pills missing from a prescription that requires the person to take a particular dosage for 1 week or 7 days, how did she double the dose?
Well, sometimes when you are given medication, you may have medication of the same exact dosage and the same exact medication another time, and you therefore may have pills that you didn't take the previous month or the month before that, and sometimes people just finish what they've had before and before they go on to the most current dose. So I am aware of what you're referring to, but I don't know if there are other bottles there that she may have had medication still in those pill bottles.
Well, I'm looking at exhibit number 1, a record from CVS Pharmacy, which all of these bottles are from. And the only time a prescription for sertraline is filled is on September 15th, 2022 for 30 pills. You aware of that?
Yes.
So there's no prior prescription for sertraline, is there?
I don't think so.
Now, in your report, you also refer to 1129, and your report on page 8, paragraph 2 says on 1129, Paula Gelada. Is that supposed to be Rebecca Gelada?
Yes.
Okay. So it also says that she prescribed Seroquel to treat Ms. Clancy's anxiety, depressed and unstable mood, and psychotic symptoms of disassociation and derealization. Where is that in Rebecca Gelada's record that that's why she prescribed Seroquel?
I'm not sure.
And in fact, you were present when Ms. Gelada testified and said that she prescribed it at 25 milligrams for insomnia, not for anxiety, depression, unstable mood, or psychotic symptoms. Did she not?
It's used off-label. It's sometimes medications are made for many things. Sometimes they're used off-label, not for what they're prescribed for. So that's a medication that is used for sleeping, although it's an antipsychotic.
But you're aware from reviewing the records and hearing testimony that that initial prescription was for a 25 milligram dose, correct?
And doctor, you mentioned the drug effect, Zoloft had an effect, and SSRIs might have an effect. Is there a difference when you're treating someone and they're taking medications between being over-medicated and having an adverse reaction to medication?
Yes.
And what is the difference?
Well, when we think about side effects, that is an example of a medication having a response. Now, sometimes we have side effects when we're not necessarily over-medicated, but we put up with those side effects. When there is too much medication, certainly we can experience those side effects. For example, over-sedation, or there are some medications that can cause stimulation, so people are not able to sleep. An adverse reaction is much more serious. An adverse reaction could be, for example, an allergic reaction that could cause death, or some type of reaction that you don't see in most people but has been reported. So there is a difference between side effects, no matter how difficult they are, and what we would call adverse effects, which can be extremely serious.
And in your review of the records of the medications that the defendant was prescribed from September through December, did you see any evidence of her having adverse effects from the medication?
Well, the insomnia secondary to the Zoloft was very concerning to me, and it would mean not just cutting the Zoloft back, but stopping it. I would say that the Zoloft was in precipitating insomnia. I mean, she reported 48 hours straight of not being able to sleep, that was an adverse effect. And an adverse effect really requires one to stop the medication.
And that is what Dr. Jennifer Tufts did with Ms. Clancy, correct? She had her stop the medication?
Correct.
And in reviewing those records again from September through December of 2022, did you see any evidence that Ms. Clancy was over-medicated?
She experienced some significant side effects from some of her medications. She was given, I think, nurse practitioner Paul gave her clonazepam, which is also a benzodiazepine, and she really had an uncomfortable reaction to that. Just woke up and felt quite confused. So she stopped that medication, understandably. Seroquel is a medication, quetiapine, that at high doses can cause some significant side effects. At lower doses, it generally helps treat insomnia. At higher doses, it can have more significant effects. And in terms of just ability to think and organize one's thoughts. However, Ms. Clancy, in December of 2022, chose at that time to continue on Seroquel, a combination of Seroquel and Valium. Nurse practitioner Gelada had suggested another medication, olanzapine, Zyprexa, which she's taking now. And Ms. Clancy asked that she continue on the Seroquel at that point and the Valium. So, it's a challenge. One has side effects, but one also sees benefit in the medication. And certainly that combination at that time, I think it was around December 7th, December 9th, that was really helping her sleep. And so she asked to continue on those two medications.
So I guess when I ask about over-medication and you talk about the side effects of the medication, there seems to be a disconnect between maybe what a lay person calls over-medicated versus what the medical definition of that is. So is what you're saying that being over-medicated medically means having side effects to the medication?
Well, no, not necessarily.
So what does over-medicated mean to you in your profession?
Well, if someone were to prescribe a medication that was beyond the limit that safely can be prescribed, for example, it's possible to be toxic on, say, lithium, which is a medication that she took for a while she was at Duxbury. And if I were prescribing, say, 1,200 milligrams of lithium twice a day, and her lithium level was toxic, as it would likely be, that would clearly be an example of over-medication.
And did you see any evidence of that scenario in the defendant's records, that she was prescribed too high a dose to make her be at a toxic level of any medication?
I think those who were prescribing for her were responding to the symptoms that she was bringing. There was a kind of a rapid increase in the dose of Seroquel, and that higher dose of Seroquel was, she did not, I believe she was ultimately prescribed at 400 milligrams, and she ever ended up taking that. But as a clinician, we do our best to try and treat symptoms.
So, Doctor, did you see, other than the Seroquel, any medications that the amount that was prescribed you would think would be over medication?
No.
And then the Seroquel itself, you said she was prescribed up to 400 milligrams, but she reported that she never took that amount, correct?
Correct.
And after her stay at McLean Hospital, she had been weaned off of the Seroquel, correct?
That's right.
And the only medications immediately after leaving McLean Hospital were trazodone and Valium, correct?
Correct.
Dr. Tufts added a medication as a result of her appointments with the defendant in January. Is that correct?
That's right.
And what was that medication?
That was amitriptyline, also known as Elavil.
And you saw that what the initial dose of that was, correct?
Correct.
What was that?
The initial dose from Dr. Tufts was 10 milligrams.
Is that a high dose for an adult?
No, it's the very smallest dose possible.
And then did Dr. Tufts increase that dose?
Yes.
And when was that?
After a week, she increased the dose from 10 milligrams to 20 milligrams.
And is that a significant increase in the dose?
No.
Is 20 milligrams a significant or large dose for an adult?
Not at all.
10 milligrams or 20 milligrams of amitriptyline, is that something you could even prescribe to a child?
Yes.
One of the things I would say is that when you want very much to improve, you of course ask your doctor and whoever else you're working with, but you might also ask other people in the family or friends any recommendations that they might have. That's sort of something that you do.
And when you say sort of something you do, what are you referring to? The women that come to a doctor in the postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, and ask for help, that they should go talk to their neighbors?
I think that one of the things that's kind of a natural human inclination is to talk to people who are close to you, friends and family and so on, and say, this is a problem I'm having. Do you have any advice, or can you help in any way?
And then over the course of the time that she was going through this experience into late January, she had a lot of providers offer a lot of diagnoses, and there were a lot of complicated considerations, so much so that the diagnosis that was given to her, being at that time adjustment disorder with anxiety and depressions, generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder 2, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, postpartum stress disorder. Those are your words, sir.
Yes.
And that was all in January, wasn't it? Right? Stop saying no.
Are you asking me whether she had all the symptoms of all those disorders in January?
Your word, sir. Your word, sir, for late January.
Objection. If we could have the question and the response.
Yeah, good. Next question, go ahead.
Did I just read right what you said in your testimony yesterday?
I'm not understanding your question, Mr. Reddington.
She also had psychotropic medication with adverse reaction. Your words to this jury yesterday.
Yes.
What is psychotropic medication with adverse reaction? What does that mean?
It's pronounced psychotropic. And
sorry?
Oh, okay. It's psychotropic medication is medication that is prescribed to help treat symptoms of mental or emotional disorder. And it helps to improve, hopefully, the symptoms that you experience. And there was another part to your question, I think.
Yeah, it's called adverse.
Yes. These medications are available because for what they're prescribed for, they help most people. They have to go through clinical trials and all sorts of things. But for a few people, there are side effects and what we call adverse reactions, and they don't help. In fact, they might make things worse. And it appeared to me from reviewing the records that for Ms. Clancy, she's one of those few people where the reactions were very different, very poor, they were not the kind of reactions that were designed to have the medication prescribed for and improve the symptoms. She just had sort of the opposite happen.
Look at her. You look at her, sir. Did she have adverse reactions in your mind after you evaluated her, looked at the medical records, and looked at all of the scripts that she had? Do you believe that she had adverse reactions?
Sustained as to the form.
Do you believe that she had adverse reactions?
To the medication that she had been prescribed since September?
Did she have adverse reactions, sir, up to the time of late January when you had no problem answering questions for the DA yesterday? Did she have adverse reactions into late January?
I believe she was having adverse reactions from the time she began taking the medication in October up to and including January.
Do you think that the treatment that she got from Tufts and Gelada was good?
Objection.
No, overruled.
I don't know. That's not something that I evaluated as part of my evaluation of Ms. Clancy. Yes.
Okay. And so what types of psychological testing did you do with Ms. Clancy?
There were several reasons why I wanted to do psychological testing. One is what we call response style. In a matter like this, somebody like Ms. Clancy during an interview could respond what we call reliably, which is within the limits of her memory, as accurately as she possibly can. But there are other response styles. One is that somebody could do what we call exaggeration or even fabrication. Sometimes that's called malingering, which is they distort or they take the kind of report that they do and they exaggerate or even fabricate the severity of what they are experiencing. And then the other kind of response style is to underreport, basically to say, I'm going to minimize or even deny things that I actually experience. So response style is always important in doing a forensic evaluation like this, and I paid attention to it. And one of the psychological tests that I administered, something called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, has scales that allow me to look and say, is she being kind of reliable, or is she exaggerating or fabricating, or is she minimizing or denying? So that was one of the reasons that I wanted to do these tests. The second is I wanted to pay attention to possible symptoms of what we call severe mental illness, things like hallucinations or delusions or mental disorganization. They can't really kind of focus on what's being discussed so much as you tend to get off track or have tangential speech, which is kind of running off the topic and going to different ways and so on. Cognitive disorganization is another speech. There's also review of her reported symptoms around January 24th of 2023, and I wanted to ask her questions in a fairly comprehensive way about that. There are other symptoms that she was experiencing reportedly, depression in particular, and I wanted to know how depressed she was feeling. And so that was something that I could also measure with these psychological tests. And then finally, suicidal thinking was quite important. And I wanted to ask her questions about her thinking and feeling and behavior related to suicide, kind of leading up to January 24th and then around that time. So these are all reasons why I gave her psychological tests.
Okay, doctor, I had asked you if you were aware that government's Dr. Heilbrun had administered the MMPI test and came to a conclusion as to whether or not Lindsay was telling the truth, faking, or exaggerating symptoms. And you relied on that test as a portion of your opinion. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jurors what the results of that test were, to your knowledge?
In summary, the results were that Lindsay Clancy had a tendency to minimize and did not have a tendency to exaggerate what she was saying and her own symptoms.
Did it also indicate that she was not, I think the terminology is faking or lying in her answers, but in fact was being truthful as best she could be?
Yes, although the test is a little more specific about symptoms rather than lying or not lying, but it did not suggest any evidence of faking symptoms.
Okay, and I'm sorry, that broke up. It did not suggest any evidence of what?
No evidence of faking psychiatric symptoms.
And then finally, one of the scales in that test is referred to as the K, I think from the books, the K scale or the lie scale. Is that correct?
Yes, that was not elevated.
Not elevated. Okay. Now, doctor, in your experience, do you have any particular subspecialty or interest in the concept of people that are malingering or faking in the forensic world? In other words, if it's a criminal case, if it's a workman's comp case where somebody's pretending their back hurts, things of that nature. Have you focused on that as a subspecialty or interest in your career?
That has been a major interest. I've actually written 46 articles or book chapters in this area. The first was 1984, and over the course of that, of course, new research comes out. So when you write a new edition of a book chapter, it would incorporate new material. So even though the chapter may go through 5 editions in a particular book, they're up to date, and the ones which were written earlier would no longer be the best basis for forming an opinion.
Now, for example, when you reviewed Dr. Heilbrun's report for the government, did he refer to your articles?
He did refer to my research, yes.
And was that updated research or was it old research that he referenced?
He referenced older research.
One of the things that you told the jury is that you felt that she was malingering or basically lying. I guess you were telling the jury, in your opinion, that she was making stuff up to make herself look like she's crazy when she killed the children. Is that what you told the jury?
I didn't use those words.
No. You're a little more finesse than I was. But nevertheless, sir, you're talking about malingering, right?
Yes, the statements about the auditory hallucination.
Yes. Excuse me.
Yes.
The answer is yes. You were talking about malingering is my question. Yes or no, right? That's all?
Yes.
Okay. And when you're talking about malingering, sir, basically that would be when a person finds it in their interest to basically exaggerate or lie to an investigating psychiatrist, right?
Correct.
And that would be because it's in their interest, like I want to pretend that I'm crazy so a jury thinks I'm crazy and I don't have to pay for a crime. That would be in a criminal sense, right?
Yes.
Workman's comp cases, you know, a guy gets hurt in the truck and then they end up having interviews by guys like you to make sure to see if, in fact, they're legitimately hurt for a workman's comp claim, right?
Yes.
Or a civil case, like an auto accident, right?
Yes.
And there are tests that can be administered to people to see, from a psychiatrist standpoint, whether or not there is objective indicia of the fact that the person is indeed malingering.
Yes.
And what are those tests?
Well, I'm not a neuropsychologist, but there's a test called the SIRS, also the TOMS test of memory. So there are certain tests that can be given by neuropsychologists to assess malingering about certain aspects, certain issues.
You've also heard, I imagine, of the MMPI, which is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory Test, right?
Yes.
And that's one that has different scales that you can examine to determine if somebody is lying or malingering or exaggerating or anything like that, right?
Correct.
And you know that Dr. Heilbrun administered that very test to Lindsay about, I don't know, 2 months before you got there, right?
Yes.
Which would be about 4 months from now, where we stand now, right?
Something like that.
And would you agree, sir, that even though it would have been perhaps better to actually meet with Lindsay within the first 6 months after the incident, or a year even, or maybe even 2 years, but nevertheless, it still has reliability and validity, does it not, when it's administered to her?
The MMPI does, yes.
Okay. And you know, sir, that she, in fact, had no impact on the scales at all, with the exception of likelihood of suicide.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Indicating that, as far as that test that was administered to her by Dr. Heilbrun, did not have any evidence at all. This kid was lying, exaggerating, suppressing anything. She was being truthful, right?
Objection.
Overruled.
About the questions that were on the MMPI, yes.
And those questions, sir, pertain to personality traits, they pertain to her recollection, they pertain to all of the investigation that Heilbrun was conducting, right?
No.
Okay. So, when the tests were administered and the results were provided, would you agree with me, yes or no, that specifically the test indicated that she was not malingering?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned one of the other things that you were concerned. Oh, by the way, would you agree with me that Dr. Philip Resnick, as you indicated, is like a world-renowned person on filicide, or the killing of your children? He's also a person that is in the forefront pretty much worldwide on malingering, right?
Yes, he has written about that.
He's done more than write about it. He's basically given hundreds of lectures and many, many, many learned treatises, all about people that lie to psychiatrists to try to get away with something, right? Right?
Yes.
Okay. And you know, sir, that Dr. Resnick examined Lindsay, and one of the first things that he did was determine whether or not, in his opinion, she was malingering, lying, suppressing, exaggerating, or doing anything like that, right?
Yes.
In his opinion, sir, when you read his report after all the testing of his examination, is that she was not lying to him at all. Isn't that right?
I would say is the more inconsistency there is, the more problematic I find it to take any one particular account and say this is the accurate one.
And then what other evidence did you find against acute psychosis?
There is some research that's been conducted on malingered hallucinations, which are accounts of hallucinations that are exaggerated or fabricated. And I found it useful to look at that research and see what it suggested and kind of lay it out there in terms of the way she described it. So some research suggests that that one consideration is whether the voices are internal or external, whether they're coming from your own thoughts or whether they're coming from outside of your head. And Ms. Clancy perceived this voice as external, which is more consistent with genuine hallucinations. However, command hallucinations are often, in about 88% of individuals reporting them by one account, accompanied by a related delusion. Ms. Clancy did not report any accompanied delusions. So thus far you've got 1 point for genuine and 1 point for possible exaggerated. Then there's frequency and control. Genuine psychotic hallucinations are more often intermittent than constant. They'll come and they'll go. You'll hear it, stop hearing it. You'll hear it again, stop hearing it, and this can extend over a period of time. Ms. Clancy, in this instance, reported that the voice was constant for 18 to 20 minutes and then it stopped. It had not been experienced before, and it has not been experienced since. And she also did not report having any control over the voice or over her actions in response to the voice. Then the next item is content. So genuine hallucinations are often familiar, use both genders, and are clear rather than vague. Ms. Clancy described this voice as clear, but it was unfamiliar and it was a single male voice. So that was sort of mixed. I'm not counting it as one direction or another. And then finally, reaction and coping. Individuals who experience hallucinations like this often try to reduce their influence in different ways. Could be praying, could be listening to music. And while those who inaccurately report the experience of such hallucinations often do not describe coping mechanisms. And Ms. Clancy didn't report any attempt to stop the voice or distract herself from it or what have you. So there were about 3 points on which her account more closely resembled exaggerated or fabricated hallucinations. One where it looked more genuine and one that was kind of mixed.
If I could ask you a question, you said that there were more points indicating malingering or exaggerating the existence of the voice. But earlier you testified about your psychological testing of Ms. Clancy, and it showed minimization, and it didn't show malingering. Could you explain how those two things could occur in the same person at the same time?
Yes. When we try to appraise through testing or specialized measures something that looks like malingering or exaggeration, the way we typically do it as psychologists who develop the measures is it looks like somebody who is going to take a shotgun approach. They're going to say unusual things are wrong and strange things are wrong and many things are wrong and things like that. If you do that, we're pretty good at picking up that shotgun approach to malingering. But if I ask you a bunch of questions and you answer them almost entirely in a genuine way, that you're being as accurate as you can, except with one exception, when I ask you about one experience or one symptom and you exaggerate or fabricate that, it's we can't pick that up through our testing. So what we have to do instead is we have to kind of develop our ideas about how it might have been experienced, what it was consistent with, what the disorder is. We take a broader approach, which is what I've tried to do in talking about this.
Be upsetting, correct?
They sometimes are, yes.
Now, you've written a lot about malingered psychosis, correct?
Yes.
And malingering psychosis, you can have a mental illness and your malingering could be exaggerating those symptoms or saying you have psychosis symptoms when you don't, correct?
That's correct.
And one of the things that you have written, and there's an article that you wrote called Faking It, you've written in here, quote, command auditory hallucinations are easy to fabricate. Persons experiencing genuine command hallucinations do not always obey the voices, especially if doing so would be dangerous, correct?
That's correct.
You've also given some points to other practitioners. If you, quote, if you suspect a person of malingered auditory hallucination, ask what he or she does to make the voices go away or diminish in intensity, correct?
Yes.
Because typically someone who hears a voice telling them to do something horrible like kill their child will try to resist that voice initially, correct?
That there's variability. Some do and some don't.
And in fact, the case you mentioned earlier, Andrea Yates, Miss Yates, in fact, committed herself to a hospital 5 times and tried to kill herself twice, all while trying to not kill her children, correct?
Yes.
She had heard voices for months and telling her to kill her children, and to resist those voices, she actually tried to kill herself, correct?
Until she could no longer resist the voices, yes.
Right. But she tried.
Right, as did Miss Clancy.
Well, according to the records and reports that we have that are in evidence, Miss Clancy heard the voice and immediately acted, correct? According to those records?
Well,
Is that correct?
Well, Miss Clancy had impulses to harm her children, which she did resist until the command hallucination when she was overwhelmed, yes.
But according to the records and the testimony that we've had, she had an impulse in December one time to harm her children, correct?
I believe it was on 2 occasions that she mentioned it to her husband.
And then never again after that until her kids were killed, correct?
There were only 2 occasions she mentioned it, but she referred to having these horrible impulses. So that suggests to me she was dealing with it on an ongoing basis, although she mentioned it only twice to her husband.
But she never said she had thoughts to kill her children. She said she had thoughts to harm her children, correct?
Yes, but actually, I think it's clear that to harm her children was to kill her children.
Well, in the records where you say that she was so clear in presenting her symptoms to her doctors, she repeatedly was asked if she had any homicidal ideation, and she repeatedly said no, correct?
That's right, and she did in the initial parts of her treatment, but by late December and January is when she did have those impulses.
But what
and
she
she
told
did not
her,
acknowledge them.
but what she told
She
her
did not acknowledge
doctors,
them to her doctors.
what she told her doctors in December is that she had no homicidal ideation. She only reported suicidal ideation, correct?
Yes, and as noted, that's very common because people fear their children will be taken away.
So it's better to kill them than to have them taken away.
Sustained.
You know, it's not better to kill them
Hold on, Doctor.
than have them taken away.
That question is stricken, that answer is stricken. Okay.
You say that she was very forthcoming in her symptoms to her medical providers, but she never told those medical providers that she had an impulse to harm her children, correct?
That's correct.
You also, in teaching people about malingering, about faking hearing voices or being psychotic, you give pointers of what people should look for, such as patient uses no strategies to diminish hallucinations. Patient states he obeys all commands, correct?
Yes.
You also, in a podcast, evidence entitled Identifying Malingering with Dr. Philip Resnick, you were asked about malingering, and you said, and asked about hearing voices, and you said, quote, so a common example I'll use in teaching is if you hear a voice out of the blue that says, kill your mother, your moral fiber would cause you to hesitate. But if you have concurrent delusion that your mother is an evil wizard, you're more likely to act on that command hallucination, correct?
Correct.
And there's no evidence in the records or in the testimony that we've had thus far that Ms. Clancy believed that her children were evil or that they were possessed or that there was any danger posed by them or to them by such forces, correct?
Instead, Ms. Clancy.
Well, it was a yes or no question, Doctor.
No, go ahead. You can answer that.
Instead, Ms. Clancy had the psychotic, distorted belief that her children would be better off in heaven rather than being motherless. So that was her psychotic distortion, coupled with the command hallucination. So she met the exact requirement you're referring to.
Yes.
Now, you've described in your testimony in this court repeated auditory hallucinations about wanting to kill herself or that she should kill herself and that she is damaged or her brain is damaged, right?
That's correct.
Now, did you have a conversation with her in one of these 35 hours about that particular voice or thought or belief?
So when I meet with Ms. Clancy, it's not as if I have one conversation on one of the 35 hours. To have thoroughness and exactitude, one does what we call intra-rater reliability. In other words, over the period of time, to confirm what someone says to you to help endorse the veracity or accuracy of that, you'll ask that question in a multitude of different ways. So I don't just ask once, did you hear a voice on that day? I asked in different ways over time, and her answers pretty much remain the same.
So when you quote in your report, when questioned about the nature and content of these horrible thoughts, Ms. Clancy stated, quote, like a really bad and intrusive thought that I didn't feel like it was mine, telling me I should kill myself, your brain is damaged, you're never going to get better, end quote. Where does the quote come from?
Where does the quote come from?
Right.
She had said that to me.
To you, at some point.
Yes.
Okay. And this is well after the incident occurred, correct?
Yes.
And you reviewed all the records to know that she did not endorse that she was hearing a voice to any of her providers between September and January 23rd of 2023.
So when someone...
Yes or no, sir?
That's a difficult question to say yes or no from, because sometimes if someone says something that's inaccurate, it's not an affirmatory or a negative response. That's misleading.
My question to you, though, was where in the records from September to January 23rd or 2022 did she tell any of the providers she saw that she heard a voice telling her to kill herself?
It's not in the records.
Okay. And you're aware that she has spoken to several forensic psychiatrists and psychologists over the course of this case, right? Not just yourself.
Yes, she spoke to 3 retained experts in April 10th and April 12th of 2026. And then on June 12th of 2026, 1,172 days after I initially met with her, then 1,220 days after I met with her. That's the third examiner.
Well, you're aware that you're referring to Dr. Heilbrun, Dr. Mack, and Dr. Saathoff, correct?
Correct.
But you're aware that she also spoke with Dr. Resnick and Dr. Spinelli well before that.
On May 5th of 2023, approximately 90 days more or less later. Yes.
And you're also aware, sir, that she never told Dr. Resnick in a recorded interview, nor Dr. Heilbrun, Dr. Mack, or Dr. Saathoff that she heard.
Sustained.
Your testimony is that she told you that she heard this voice. Fair to say she identified to you that it was her own voice that she heard, correct?
That's not correct.
So she told you that she heard a male's voice?
That's correct.
When?
On the night of the incident, January 24th, 2023.
No, I'm referring to the fact that you've now testified that she heard this, as you call it, a persistent what's the word you use? Persecutorial voice over the course of time? Was that your testimony?
So you're referring to the ongoing negative voices or intrusive thoughts that she was hearing,
right?
Where she felt, in fact, other people could hear those voices, thought broadcasting. So there are multiple layers here of hearing intrusive thoughts.
So,
hearing voices so loud that she believed other people could hear her. Those are two separate phenomena, if you will.
In those voices that you're saying she told you she heard about wanting to die or to kill herself or her brain was damaged prior to January 24th of 2023, did she say it was her own voice she could hear? It was her own thoughts?
She did not identify whose voice it was.
Fair to say the only time she specifically said she heard a male voice was when she recounts the events on January 24th of 2023.
Yes, that's accurate.
And you'd agree that there's a difference between the idea that somebody believes their thoughts would be or could be heard by others and the belief that they are being heard by others, right?
Yes, it's a matter of semantics and it's a level of degreeism. Believing and knowing, two totally separate things.
And believing, having a fixed belief like that, would be a delusion, right?
That's correct. A delusion is a fixed false belief that is unshakable and not something you get rid of either through your own efforts to tell the voice to go away or other people saying, just, for example, try to stop thinking about it.
And the idea that she believed that something was wrong with her brain, or that if people could know what was happening, that the police might get involved, that is something that could happen if somebody articulates those things, right?
Absolutely.
And as far as your conversations about hallucinations and auditory hallucinations, you indicated that at some point, or at points, I think was your testimony, that the defendant did hear a voice. But you're aware that she never reported to Jennifer Tufts that she heard a voice.
She did not.
She never reported to Rebecca Gelada that she heard a voice, did she?
She did not.
She never reported to Letitia Dukes that she heard a voice.
She did not.
And the only time she's ever said that she heard this voice was on January 24th of 2023. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Thank you. Nothing further.
So when the district attorney asks you whether or not Lindsay, after all the symptoms that we've already gone through, told Rebecca Gelada that she heard a voice, told Dr. Tufts that she heard a voice, and denied that she heard a voice, would you agree that there are reasons that a woman would not tell the doctor or minimize their symptoms out of fear?
Yes.
What kind of fear? Fear of what?
Well, in the records, it's stated that Ms. Clancy reported she was worried that her children would be taken away from her, perhaps by the Department of Children and Families, if she reported very severe symptoms. The other thing is, as a health care professional, boards of registration sometimes take a dim view of people who have been in treatment for certain psychiatric illnesses. And so she might have been concerned about her nursing license, but that's speculation.
So there are other reasons why a person may be concerned about telling healthcare providers, mandated reporters, that they're hearing voices, correct?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that you don't have to see the proverbial unicorn in the corner to your health provider to be suffering from psychosis?
Yes, that's true.
And can you tell us, Council was asking about the symptomology, psychosis, is that something that just grinds on for day after week after month, or is that something that comes on out of nowhere very quickly?
No, overall.
It can be quite episodic.
What does that mean?
It means that an episode can start and stop, and then an interval of time goes by. It could be days, weeks, or months, and then another episode occurs.
Council asked you about bipolar disorder, the suspicions of bipolar disorder from Dr. Gelada, and then talked about the prescriptions that were prescribed. Is it, in your opinion, appropriate to prescribe a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor to a person that is bipolar?
No, overall.
It would be considered something to be done cautiously and usually with a mood stabilizer begun at the same time to prevent the possibility of making manic symptoms worse.
Thank you, sir.
Buckingham.
So just briefly, you didn't interview
Diagnosing and treating people who have psychosis, and what you've learned in all your training and schooling. Is it typical for someone in psychosis to hear a voice only one time, never before, never after?
No.
And again, based on your training and experience, is it typical for someone in psychosis to hear a voice that's constant rather than intermittent?
No, that is not typical.
And what does it mean, the difference between a constant voice and an intermittent voice?
Well, an intermittent voice would come and go. It wouldn't necessarily just keep playing over and over again as if it were on a tape, which Ms. Clancy told me that it was a voice. It's the same thing in the same tone, repeated over and over and over until she had strangled Callan.
And is it typical, based on your training and experience, for someone to hear command hallucinations and then for them to stop abruptly?
No. Committing the act is not curative of the voice. I've not ever seen that.
And doctor, based on your training and experience, someone in psychosis hearing a voice without accompanying delusions, is that typical?
That is that would be pretty rare. It's absolutely not typical.
And in talking to Ms. Clancy, did you speak to her about the concerns she had that if she had voiced thoughts of harming her children to providers, medical providers, that her children would have been taken away?
Yes.
And did you see that as a delusional thought?
No. Certainly with the requirements that healthcare professionals have to report any issues that could cause harm to children, for example, as required reporters, it's very rational for her to be concerned that by voicing her thoughts of harm could cause her children, certainly an assessment and a rapid assessment and a determination about how best to keep the children safe. So I didn't see that as irrational, but rather rational, just understanding the healthcare system.
And when reviewing the records and speaking to Ms. Clancy, did you see or notice any delusional statements or beliefs surrounding the hearing of that voice on the 24th?
No, I didn't.
Now, based on your training experience, is it typical for someone in psychosis to hear a voice and immediately act on it?
No.
And why is that?
I'd like to have a Dobia hearing at this point, Judge, on this. I'd like to test his qualifications to this.
I'm going to, same objection, same ruling.
So your opinion is it's not typical, correct?
Correct.
Now, you mentioned the defendant told you that when she received the call from her husband at 5:33 and called him back at 5:34, that she was getting dinner ready for her children, correct?
Yes.
And did she tell you what she was about to get out of the refrigerator?
Yes. She said she was at the refrigerator and that the refrigerator door was open and that she was getting chicken nuggets out of the refrigerator section for her children.
Now, in your collateral interview with Patrick Clancy, did you learn from him that when he left the residence, the children were already eating chicken nuggets on the couch?
Yes.
And did Patrick Clancy tell you that Dawson in particular was eating chicken nuggets and green beans out of a bowl on the couch?
Yes, that's what he told me.
And is it fair to say that there are crime scene photographs showing a bowl on the couch?
Yes.
And so is there any significance to you in the defendant telling you that when she got the phone call from Patrick, when he's at CVS, that she's making chicken nuggets versus Patrick and telling you that that had already happened and the crime scene photos showing you the bowl was already on the couch?
Well, it's inconsistent.
And are inconsistencies like that important in your evaluations in cases like this?
Yes.
And how so?
Well, looking at someone's mental status at the time of an offense, it's important to understand what was going on in their mind at the time. And in this case, the widely divergent reports from Lindsay Clancy versus her husband Patrick raise questions about what she is telling me and how things are happening. So certainly that's a cause for significant concern. One of them is not correct in their statement.
And in terms of what you testified about earlier about the defendant giving you one version of what the voice told her and giving Dr. Spinelli a different version of what the voice told her, is there any significance in your evaluation to that?
Yes.
And what is that?
Well, again, it's markedly inconsistent. Ms. Clancy was very clear with me about the time that the voice started and that it was constant for a period of time until the children were killed, and then it stopped. And according to Dr. Spinelli's report, Ms. Clancy stated that the voice started much, much earlier, actually when Patrick Clancy left. And so we're talking about a significant difference in time. And those two just, they don't match. So it's hard to, which version is the one that I should consider.
Sir, first of all, counsel was asking you a question about the inconsistent statement or what have you. You indicated, sir, if I stand corrected, you administered a test, the MMPI, to her, right?
Yes, I did.
And one of the sub categories.
On the scope.
No, she asked about inconsistent statements.
No, yeah, overall.
Is the K scale or the lie scale, right? Yes or no? Just please, yes or no?
The MMPI does have a K scale.
Okay.
And it
And
does
that
have an
measures-
L scale.
That measures if a person, to you as the administering psychologist, is bluntly lying, right?
No.
Okay. Does it also, in your testing, determine if the person is exaggerating their symptoms?
Yes, it's much
Okay, the answer is
closer
yes.
to
The
that.
answer is yes, thank you. And when you administered the test to Lindsay, close to 3 years later, you indicated that it was the fact that it was late that you administered the test. It was testing her at the time it was administered, right?
That's right.
And one of the things that, the results, by the way, if I understand, looking at your transcript of testimony, is regardless of all of your explanations about MMPI and the other psychological testing, she was not elevated on anything except for suicide scale, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So she wasn't, according to the testing you administered when you saw her with Mack, exaggerating, lying, malingering, anything like that, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And one of the things that you did in your report, sir, is regarding the lying or the malingering, is you made reference to, I believe, Dr. Resnick, Philip Resnick. You know him, right?
I do.
He's a significant authority in the field of filicide. Is that right?
He is.
And Dr. Resnick indicated, sir, that his opinion as to the lack of malingering, and, as well as yours, right?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And you made reference to one of Dr. Resnick's articles, actually, in your report, correct?
Some of his research on...
The answer is yes. We can make this easy. The answer is yes. Did you look at and cite Dr. Philip Resnick's research report?
His research, yes, I
Okay.
did.
And are you aware, sir, that what you cited is outdated? Are you familiar with the 2012 article by Dr. McCarthy Jones collaborating with Dr. Resnick talking about the largest study of hallucinations ever conducted in the world?
I'm aware that as a researcher, you build on some of the things...
No, not what researchers do. Are you aware of that report?
No.
Okay. Are you aware, sir, that that study was after the report that you cited in your report, and it involved 191 individuals who were asked almost 400 questions about auditory hallucinations? You aware of that?
No.
And are you aware, sir, that in fact it was determined that auditory hallucinations can come from within and it can come from without in that report? You're not aware of that, right?
No.
No? Now, with all of the understanding in your testimony, sir, about the voices, correct me if I'm wrong. You're telling this jury and Dr. Saathoff's opinion, based on your experience and all of your writings and everything, that when one hears voices, they would be internal or external? To be legit.
They can be either.
Really? I'm sorry. I thought you said that they had to be a particular type, like not internal. If they're internal, they're probably lying. But that's not true. I'm wrong.
The voice that Ms. Clancy told me about during the time of this event, she said was external.
Okay. And is that consistent with your understanding, sir, of the research on auditory hallucinations?
Well, some auditory hallucinations can be internal.
So,
for people who are psychotic.
and you were aware, sir, that Philip Resnick, Dr. Resnick, did publish the article in the International Journal of Law and Psychiatry in 2014 in conjunction with Simon McCarthy-Jones. You're aware of that?
Yes.
The treatise, yes. And would you agree with me, sir, that in fact, just if some doctors might feel that hallucinations auditory must originate from the exterior as opposed to interior, would you agree, sir, that in this article, claim number 1, doctors may say, voices are typically heard as coming from inside the head, with the corollary that voices heard as coming from outside the head are atypical. Would you agree with that?
That was not my recollection of the research. That
Okay.
I understood that it was a minority of.
No, excuse me. It doesn't matter what you...
Oh, hold on. Good. Next question.
I'm going to approach you with the article. We've already established. Right into all that. Okay?
It was quite some time ago.
Sure. Let me put the papers over here just so I don't knock them over. So, if we can share that.
Do you want me to say it?
No, I want you to share it. Put it right here so I can look at it. Okay. All right. Would you agree, sir, that it says voices are typically heard? This is a claim number 1. In other words, doctors feel voices are typically heard as coming from inside the head, with the corollary that voices heard as coming from outside the head are atypical. Did I read that right?
Yes.
Okay. And what does atypical mean?
Atypical means unusual.
All right. And this article is saying that there are psychiatrists that feel that voices heard outside of the head, auditory hallucinations, are indeed not legitimate. Is that fair?
That was the old original way of thinking. That was the way it was taught at one time. That they had to be external for someone to actually be experiencing psychosis.
Okay. So we agree then, as Dr. Resnick indicates, that the research evidence does not support the claim that internally located voices are emblematic of genuine AVH,
Auditory verbal hallucinations.
and externally located voices are atypical. We cite a particular word, correct?
Yes.
For example, that says, the largest study on this question, Kathy Jones, was in 2012. That's what you're referring to as the old research, right? Oh, one other thing, you were in med school and taught that too.
I was speaking about very old.
Okay. Basically found that of 199 psychiatric patients, 81% who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, 38% heard both voices coming from inside and outside their head. Did I read that right?
You did.
All right. So when Lindsay indicated to you that she indeed heard a loud auditory hallucination, voice, deep, male, commanding her to do what she told you, that was external, correct?
Yes.
And you don't have any issues with that. In other words, that is very likely could be legitimate.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you take a young woman who, as the evidence has shown, is suffering with her mental
important. So if I could have the next slide.
Sure. And in evaluating the why, did you come up with 2 possible explanations?
I did, yes, which is on this slide.
And so can you explain that, please?
I can, yes. There are a number of reasons in my experience why people harm one another, why people kill one another. And most of these reasons ended up not applying to Miss Clancy. I mean, it wasn't job related. She wasn't in the military, the police. Didn't have to do with money or property or fame or anger or being callous or abusive or being afraid or doing it himself. None of those there was any evidence for. But there were a couple of things that started to have some evidence for, and this is what it looked like. One is the psychosis, the possibility that she had a severe mental illness, experiencing hallucinations, delusions, that sort of thing. And as part of that, on January 24th, experienced those symptoms that we're going to talk about in a minute. And I'm calling that the first bullet point there, acute psychosis with command hallucinations. The second possible explanation was as part of an attempt to take one's own life, as part of a suicide, one might harm one's children if you thought that would prevent them from suffering. And let me see if I can give you an example of that. If one of us were to learn, and we had no doubt in our mind that the Holocaust was coming tomorrow, and we thought that was going to be awful, and I can't live through that, and so I'm going to take my own life. If I had children, the question might come up, do I take them with me? Do I take their lives as well? Now, I'm not saying that I would definitely do that, but what I'm saying is that it would come up as a possibility in what I thought about. And so there ended up being, in my mind, two possible explanations for why she did what she did. The first being the acute psychosis with command hallucinations, and the second being this was a serious suicide attempt, and she wanted the children to be with her so she wouldn't be separated from them, and so they wouldn't have to suffer after she was gone. Now, in a minute, I'm going to talk about the evidence that I saw supporting each of those, but I will tell you right now, in advance of talking about that most of the evidence that I saw support.
And Doctor, when a person is psychotic or involved in having a psychosis, in your opinion, are they able to appear normal, quote unquote, communicate with people, drive a car, things of that nature?
Well, let me say there that Ms. Clancy herself did her best to not reveal the extent of her depression. She was frank with members of her own family. Her sister, her mother-in-law were aware of how anguished and depressed she was. But with more casual friends, she tended not to show the extent of her depression. I'm not suggesting that she was, although psychosis can indeed wax and wane. For example, on the day of her crime, I'm not suggesting that she was frankly psychotic every minute. She was functioning. In fact, she said she was having a better day than other days, and she actually went out and made a snowman with the kids, took Cora to a doctor for the 5th birthday checkup, and was functioning at a level that was not frankly psychotic until she had a command hallucination while her husband, Patrick, was out doing a couple of chores.
And can you tell us, Doctor, what, in your opinion, what a command hallucination is and how it fits, if you will, in a diagnosis of psychosis?
Yes. If we take, first of all, a hallucination is simply hearing a voice, and the voice can be benign or it can be more malignant. So a voice may just simply say, open the window. About 1/3 of voices are called command hallucinations. That is an instruction to do something. And the majority of those commands are benign. So it might be open a window, get a glass of water. It might be something much more ominous, such as to kill oneself or harm someone else. Those are dangerous command hallucinations. Now, in Ms. Clancy's case, she had not only a command hallucination on the day that she killed her children, she had what is known as a delusion of influence. That is, not only did she hear a command, but she felt that her body was taken over by an external force where she was in a dream state and did not have control of her own body. It was almost like she was a puppet and someone else was pulling the strings.
And Doctor, moving along in your analysis, did you look into and evaluate the defendant's decision to send Patrick Clancy on errands on January 24th, 2023?
Yes.
And what stood out to you as significant in what you learned from the records and from Ms. Clancy herself in that area?
I asked Ms. Clancy to tell me about that that afternoon, and specifically that decision for takeout. And as I recall, she told me that she texted her husband Patrick basically to say what would you think about having takeout? It's been a long day. And a fairly broad, open-ended request, and that he responded positively, and from then she made the arrangements to look up the distance between their home, and 3V restaurant in Plymouth, but also looking at basically making plans to have the food ordered. And she had texted her husband ultimately and asked him about, to tell her what order to make. And so in looking at the record, it was really reversed. Instead of starting with asking her husband, what would you think about takeout? How about getting takeout? The record shows that Ms. Clancy did a lot of searching prior to that in terms of 3V, the distance, and the like. So there were a number, getting information prior to requesting a text, sending a text to her husband. And in the text, rather than saying, what would you think about takeout, getting takeout, she said, how about getting takeout at 3V? I am, it's been a long day, et cetera. And so this reversal in terms of what she told me and what actually we see in the collateral, I thought was significant.
How so?
Well, she told me that the only restaurant that she could remember about getting takeout was 3V. And Patrick told me that they had never gotten takeout from 3V. He named West End Grill and Chestnut Grill as places that were in Duxbury and close by that they liked and that they often got takeout from. They had been to 3V and they liked it. They had gone as a family, but they had never gotten takeout there. takeout from 3B. And so presenting not just the idea of takeout, but how about 3B? And she had already done lots of checking about distance and the like. I thought was inconsistent. What I saw from the record was not what she told me in terms of the order in which she made those decisions, and so I saw that as being significant.
And was there a similar scenario with the request of Patrick from the defendant to also go to CVS?
Yes.
And so what was the difference between what she told you about the plan to go to CVS and or what she told Patrick and what she had done in terms of research?
Well, the research for, I think it was Miralax, which was suggested for Cora's constipation. They had had an appointment that morning in pediatrics, and this was suggested that the Miralax and CVS was something that Ms. Clancy looked into sometime after 4 o'clock, but not long after 4 o'clock, and well before she contacted her husband. But that she did not communicate to her husband the importance of picking up Miralax at CVS, who she had called, until really right before he left. So he had planned on going to 3B, driving to 3B, almost 6 miles, to get the takeout, and then she also added on that other errand right before he left.
And so was it significant to you that she had researched the Miralax and looked into CVS an hour before, but just added that that part of the errand on right before her husband left?
Yes.
And why?
Well, it lengthened the trip. It added one extra obligation for Patrick, and that would make for a longer.
And as January continued, she was, to your knowledge, using her computer to look up drugs and interactions and side effects and things of that nature?
Yes.
If a person is in a psychosis, or as I think you said premorbidly, psychosis, are they able to do things like look up things on a computer?
Yes.
And you're aware that she actually at one point looked up, can you cure, I think a sociopath or a psychopath or something like that?
It was sociopath, yes.
Is that indicative of her feeling that she is a homicidal maniac and has to have some help, or is that in the same time frame that she was Googling all of the effects of medications on a human being?
Is it an objection?
Yes.
Yeah, sustained.
So during the period that she was Googling, well, let me ask you, what was she Googling?
Googling words about sociopaths, sociopathy. Can you treat a sociopath? What are hallucinations?
What else?
Bear with me one moment, if you don't mind.
Well, you had a chance. Did you look at the Google searches that she had
Yes.
done that's in evidence and the jurors were able to look at it?
Yes.
Did she continue to Google the effects of medication, psychosis, numbness, heaviness, unable to, things like that?
Yes. All things that are related to the way
And if
she
a
was
person
feeling.
is in a psychotic state, are they able to continue to Google and use a computer to look things up?
Yes,
They're able to use a phone?
yes.
They're
People
able-
who are in that state can do things that they've done before. New tasks may be difficult, like changing a tire, but if you looked up things on the internet, you can look them up again. If you drove a car, you can drive a car.
Now, the morning of January 24th, I believe she went somewhere. Is that right?
Yes.
Where'd she go?
She's taken her daughter to a pediatrician, a standing pediatrician appointment.
And is it your understanding, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that a person who's in a psychotic state is able to drive a car for a short distance, go to an appointment, and interact and talk to people?
Yes, they can do everyday tasks of living.
So the fact that she's not talking about the unicorns in the corner, and she's not slurring her speech, and she's not unable to walk, to your opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, does that mean that she's not in a psychotic state?
It does not.
Would you tell us, after she took Cora to the doctors, and the jurors have had a chance to look at the exhibits, there's photographs between her and her husband, Pat, back and forth. In the afternoon, what did she do?
She built a snowman in the backyard
Did
with
she
two of her kids.
later in that day Google directions to a restaurant, 3V restaurant, I believe?
Yes,
Is that something that a person can do when they're in that type of a state?
easily.
Did the
Yes.
voices or the intrusive thoughts, to your interview and your understanding, abate or stop at that point on January 24th?
No.
Did they continue?
Yes.
And did she communicate by text with her husband about getting dinner and getting something from CVS?
Yes.
And what was it? Was it Pedialyte?
Pedialyte or Flexlax, it's a stool softener for her child.
And that's something that was prescribed by the doctor, right?
Yes.
Does that make sense, that if somebody is in a state where they're having these symptoms, that they're able to remember that the doctor wanted the child to have Pedialyte, and she tells her husband to get Pedialyte?
Yes, it does not interfere with that type of everyday.
And in terms of Ms. Clancy's ability to execute the strangulation of her children, is there anything about how she did it, what she did, that stood out to you in your evaluation?
Yes.
And what is that?
Ms. Clancy told me that she, after the phone call with her husband, she returned the call, that was when she took Dawson down the steps into her husband's office to strangle him. And I asked Ms. Clancy about what she remembered about what she said to Dawson to get him to go down the steps and leave, his sister and brother upstairs. And was there resistance, verbalization, et cetera, crying? And she said she could not recall that. She could only recall bringing him down the steps and then strangling him. And then she repeated that. The next child was Cora, that she went back upstairs and did not recall how she got Cora down the steps, how Cora came down the steps, but then brought her into a different area, kind of a living room area in the basement, and strangled Cora. And then lastly, that she went up to get Callan. And I asked her, I said, where was Callan? Upstairs. And she said, well, maybe in a playpen, often, she said she couldn't really remember, but then bringing Callan down. And he was the last child to be strangled, all during this time where this voice is over and over again saying, this is your last chance. You have to kill the children before you kill yourself.
Doctor, is there any significance to the fact that this voice is telling her to kill the children, but not telling her how to kill the children?
Yes.
And what is that?
Just like adults, children have a will to survive, strong will to survive. I think it's just part of being human. And so I know that Dr. Resnick described Ms. Clancy as acting as if she were a puppet, but the children are not puppets. And
in addition to, you testified today that a person in a psychotic state can do things they've done before, but it might be hard for them to do new tasks, right?
Yes.
So if it's something that is part of their daily life, getting up, caring for the kids, feeding, making a meal, driving a car, those are things that people do every day and a lot of times don't even have to think about, right?
Yes. No thinking necessary. It's a
but you're
response, automatic response.
You're aware that on this particular day of this incident, on January 24th of 2023, that the defendant took Cora to the doctors, right?
Yes.
And you indicated in your testimony today that it was for a regular checkup, but in your report you identify that it was for a stomach ache, right?
Yes. She had a stomach ache.
But in addition to maybe her having a stomach ache, she had previously had this visit scheduled, and you're aware of that now, correct?
Yes.
And at the doctor, there was a recommendation made for an over-the-counter medication, right?
Yes.
And the defendant was able to process that information, take it back with her, and then later, not immediately after the visit, but later in the day, search for where to get that medication, right?
Psychosis doesn't lower your intellectual functioning, so you can do all those things. So
Well,
that's
that
correct.
wasn't my question. My question was, did she do those things?
Yes, so that's correct.
Okay. And would you've talked a lot about that a person can operate as normally as they can, but fair to say, if you're in a psychotic state, that person themselves has a significant amount of distress, right?
Yes.
And that in order to mask those symptoms, it requires an enormous amount of control. Does it not?
It depends on the level and the extremism of the psychotic processing. So some people will hear voices that are nominal, they whisper. Some people hear voices that are yelling and screaming. So it's on a range, it's a continuum. So the more upsetting, more powerful, demanding the voice, the more difficult it might be to resist it and do other things. The less, the easier it is.
In all of the time between September of 2022 and January 23rd of 2023, at any point in which the defendant heard these voices about harming herself, she didn't act on them then, did she?
That's correct, yes. She did not act on those. She sought help instead.
One moment, please.